Good morning, Americans. Remember that movie, Good Morning Vietnam? Pretty good, wasn't it? Anyway, this morning I'm going to be reading out of the book of Enoch. And I was reading to you guys way back here in the 30s, but this is where I am in this book, more or less. A little bit before where I am, but I'm going to start reading in chapter 88. You guys pay attention, because a lot of this sounds familiar. Ancient Book of Enoch, chapter 88, titled The Nephilim Civil War. It states, then one of those first four, Raphael, seized that first star which had fallen from the heaven, Azazel, and bound it hand and foot and cast it into an abyss. Now that abyss was narrow, deep, horrible, and dark. One of the other four, Gabriel, drew a sword and gave it to those elephants, camels, and asses. Now, something I noticed in this book is those elephants, camels, and asses are pertaining to, not elephants, camels, and asses. Anyway, then they began to smite each other, and the whole earth shook because of them. Then one of those first four, Michael, gathered all the great stars whose sexual organs portrayed like horses, and bound them all hand and foot and cast them in an abyss of the earth. 89. The flood. One of those four went to that white bull, Noah, and instructed him in a secret, while it was terrified. He was born a bull, but became a man, and built a great vessel, and dwelt in it. 3 bulls, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, dwelt with him in that vessel which covered them. I looked up to heaven and saw a high roof with 7 water torrents. A great amount of water flowed through those torrents into an enclosure. As I was watching, fountains were opened on the surface of that great enclosure, and that water began to swell and rise upon the surface. And I watched that enclosure till all its surface was covered with water. The water, darkness, and mist kept increasing. The water rose above the height of that enclosure, and streamed over the sides and poured upon the whole earth. All the cattle gathered together, but eventually they were swallowed up and perished in that water. Men, women, children, you name it. But the vessel floated upon the water, while all the cattle, elephants, camels, and asses, along with all the animals, sank to the bottom so that I could no longer see them. They were not able to escape, but perished into the depths. Then the water torrents were removed from that high roof, and the chasms of the earth were leveled up, and other abysses were opened. Then the water began to run down into these abysses till the earth became visible, and that vessel settled on the earth, and the darkness retired, and light appeared. But that white bull, Noah, which had become a man, note that, but that white bull, Noah, which became a man, came out of that vessel, and the 3 bulls with him, and one of those 3 was white, Shem, like that bull Noah, and one of them was red, Japheth. as blood, and one black ham. And that white bull Noah departed from them. They began to bring forth beasts of the fields, beasts of the field and birds, so that there arose different species, Gentile nations, lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars, foxes, squirrels, swine, falcons, vultures, kites, eagles, and ravens, and among them was born a white bull, Abraham. Abraham to Joseph. They began to bite one another, but that white bull, Abraham, which was born among them, begat a wild ass, Ishmael, and a white bull, Isaac, with it. And the wild asses, Arab nations, multiplied. But that bull which was born from him begat a black wild boar, Esau, and a white sheep, Jacob, a white sheep, Jacob / Israel. And the former begat many boars, but that sheep begat 12 sheep, 12 tribes of Israel. And the former begat many boars, but that sheep, Jacob, begat 12 sheep, 12 tribes of Israel. When those 12 sheep had grown, they gave up one of them to the asses, Ishmaelite slave traders. And those asses again gave up that sheep, Joseph, to the wolves, Egyptians. And that sheep grew up among the wolves. So they're saying the wolves are the Egyptians. And the Lord brought the 11 sheep to live with it and to pasture with it among the wolves. And they multiplied and became many flocks of sheep. The wolves began to fear them, and they oppressed them until they killed their little ones. And they cast their young into the great river of water, the Nile River. But those sheep began to cry aloud on account of their little ones, and to complain unto their Lord. Moses. A sheep, Moses, which had been saved from the wolves, which is the Egyptians. Okay, here we go. A sheep, Moses, which had been saved from the wolves, Egyptians, fled and escaped to the wild asses, the Midianites. And I saw the sheep how they lamented and cried and besought their Lord with all their might, till the Lord of the sheep, Yahweh, descended on the voice of the sheep from a lofty abode, and came to them and pastured them. He called that sheep which had escaped the wolves, and spoke with it concerning the wolves, that it should warn them not to touch the sheep. The sheep went to the wolves according to the word of the Lord, and another sheep met it and went with it. And the two, Moses and Aaron, went together and entered into the assembly of those wolves. Sound familiar? It's when he went before Pharaoh and spoke with them and warned them not to touch the sheep any longer. Then I saw the wolves, and how they greatly oppressed the sheep with all their power, and the sheep cried aloud. The Lord came to the sheep, and they began to smite those wolves, the 10 plagues. And the wolves began to make lamentation, but the sheep became quiet and ceased crying out. The Exodus. The sheep departed from the wolves, the Exodus. But the eyes of the wolves were blinded, and those wolves pursued the sheep with all their power, And the Lord of the sheep, Yahweh, went with them as their leader, and all his sheep followed him, and his face was dazzling and glorious to behold. But the wolves began to pursue those sheep till they reached the sea of water, the Red Sea. And that sea was divided, and the water stood on both sides right before their eyes. And their Lord led them and stood between them and the wolves. Kind of tells a different story, huh? Tells the same story, but different. Even though those wolves could not see the sheep, they proceeded into the midst of that sea, following the sheep. When they saw the Lord of the sheep, Yahweh, they turned to flee. But that sea gathered itself together and became as it had been created, and the water drowned those wolves. But the sheep escaped from the water and traveled into a wilderness where there was no water or grass. And they began to open their eyes and see. And I saw the Lord of the sheep, Yahweh, pasturing them and giving them water and grass, and that sheep, Moses, going and leading them. And that sheep ascended to the summit of that lofty rock, Mount Sinai. And the Lord of the sheep sent it to them. So we see here the same story, but our fathers included in this story. If you go to the Holy Bible, it doesn't, it says the same thing, but it leaves out some things, don't it? Like where when the Egyptians chased God's people into the divided water, who was waiting for them? Who stood between the sheep and the wolves? Father did. Yahweh. The Holy Bible doesn't tell that like that. Though, I mean, we could gather that or we could, you know, ponder that that's how it went down, you know. But the book of Enoch just comes right out and says it, which I like that, because it's given little tidbits, as you will, that it's been hidden right in plain sight even. Sometimes the greatest hidden things are in plain sight. I learned that the hard way. Anyway, I'm busting on 13 minutes. Moses and Mount Sinai. After that I saw the Lord of the sheep who stood before them, and his appearance was great, terrible, and majestic. And all those sheep saw him and were afraid before his face. They all feared and trembled because of him, and they cried to that sheep with them, "We are not able to stand before our Lord, or to behold him." Then that sheep which led them again ascended to the summit of that rock. But the sheep began to be blinded and to wander from the way which he had showed them. But that sheep did not know it. The Lord of the sheep was enraged at them, and the sheep, Moses, discovered it, and went down from the summit of the rock, and came to the sheep, and found the greatest part of them blinded and fallen away. When they saw it, they feared and trembled at its presence, and desired to return to their folds. And that sheep took other sheep with it, and came to those sheep which had fallen away, and began to slay them. And came to those sheep which had fallen away, and began to slay them. And the sheep feared its presence. And thus that sheep brought back those sheep that had fallen away, and they returned to their folds. Anyway, spoken word this morning. It's from Enoch, and if we was reading down the Bible, it'd be in Genesis, Exodus. So, you guys be blessed today. We're approaching a new month here, February, and stay ready. God over everything. Jesus is my King. Bye.